Hello and welcome to the first episode of Beaufort County Beat, a podcast that introduces you to the people of Beaufort County, North Carolina government and gives you an inside look at the programs and services that the county offers. I am Brandon Tester, Communications Director for Beaufort County. June 1st marked the official start of the Atlantic hurricane season. It's that time of year when we anxiously watch our local forecasts, hoping that any developing storms in the tropics steer clear of land and our homes here in eastern North Carolina. Of course, we're not always that fortunate, and we've seen in years past the devastation that can be caused by a hurricane. That's why preparedness is critical, and preparedness is the name of the game for people like DC Linton, Emergency Management Coordinator with Beaufort County Emergency Services. DC is here with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you for having me.
So it's a busy time of year, as I said, DC, with hurricane season upon us, and we're really, I guess, just getting into the heart of it. When would you say the heart of hurricane season is for us?
Well, think about it right now. We've already had 3 named storms, and we've even seen a storm hit us already just last week. So usually in our area where we are in Beaufort County, it's that late August, September is when we really see our areas pop up. But, this doesn't mean it can't happen sooner.
Mm-hmm. Everyone hears a lot, especially this time of year, about preparedness, but preparedness is kind of a year-round thing, right? It's not just something that once June 1st comes around that you should be like, okay, let me make sure I have all my resources together.
Yeah. Just because the hurricane season starts on June 1st doesn't mean we can't have a hurricane June 2nd. And preparedness is something we should do all year long. Many things that we can prepare with, just having small things such as our emergency essentials. It's known fact that it takes a gallon of water per day per person. And you want to have that for 7 days. And I said 7 days because we've always been told to prepare for 3 to 4 days. Well, now, it could take up to 7 days before people could come in if we were severely impacted by a storm. Some other things that we could have in just our regular essentials would be food such as non-perishable items, canned foods for 7 days, hand sanitizer, sanitizing wipes, battery-powered or hand-cranked radios with batteries. Some people don't think about this, but what about a cell phone with a charger? What about a battery bank for your cell phone with a charger? Your first aid kits, her flashlights. And here's one thing that we noticed, which we'll probably talk about later, but when we get a bunch of canned goods, how are we going to open them? Why not have a manual can opener? So, other things, your prescription medicines, your glasses, your hearing aids, seasonal clothing, sturdy shoes, personal hygiene supplies. One thing that I like to tell everybody what they need to have on hand is you need these important documents such as insurance policies, your driver's license, your declaration papers, your social security card, your bank card. And one thing that a lot of people don't think of, because we're in a digital world now, what happens if we lose power and all the ATMs go down? You need to have some cash. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't think about having a little bit of cash, but if the ATMs aren't working and your credit card machines aren't working, you need to buy goods, you need cash. Mm-hmm. So this is a few essentials.
And I think on that topic, because a lot of people think, oh, it's not going to get that bad. I don't need to do this, that, or the other thing. But the reality is you have to be ready for anything, right?
That's right.
You got to be ready for that worst case scenario. Obviously, we all hope that it'd be better than what we expect given on the forecast, but it's just that preparedness aspect is important. And beyond that, you're not just preparing yourself and your household and your family to be able to withstand as much of the storm as possible. Is it true that you're also preparing yourself to be resilient after a storm, right? You're also
100%
getting ready to have those documents as resources in place, so when the storm passes, you're not like, well, what do I do now?
That's right. A lot of times, another good reason to have those documents in place, let's say if you live just for an example, you live down River Road, and we're talking worst case scenario, and I hate to be a doomsday guy right now, but if we're talking about preparedness for worst case scenario, I mean, this is not only just for hurricanes. I mean, it could be for severe winter storms, it could be for tornadoes, anything, to be prepared for. But having those documents, if you're going to leave your home, whether you're going to shelter at somebody's home, or we'll talk more about shelter in a little bit, but let's say if you were in that River Road area and we know it's susceptible for flooding, and a thing that we've done now in the county is done a re-entry plan. What that means is, you mean I can't leave my house and can't come back in? No. What that means is places that are flooded, the sheriff's office is going to help, and even DUI, Department of Insurance, to block those roads off. What this does is somebody can't say such and such told me I could go to their house and work on their roof, and they let them through, and then when such and such comes back home, they're robbed blind. Without these documents, they're not going to let somebody go to your home. And many other counties, coastal counties and communities have started this re-entry plan, and it's worked really great. And what we've done, we've kind of mirrored their counties, how they did their re-entry policy, and it works great for them. So it's more of protecting our citizens for that, and that's what the main documents help you for.
You got to look at everything comprehensively, right? You got to look at what am I going to do to prepare for the storm? What am I going to do to prepare myself, to feed myself, take care of myself, take care of my family during the storm? And what are we going to do after to recover from it? One of the things we talk about often is in terms of after the fact, as everyone's kind of looking after a storm, see if any hazards exist, it becomes even more important, as you said, that you have those resources in place, especially so you're ready to reach out to family if you need to. If you need to relocate, you have options available, so you're not just waiting for a shelter to open or something like that, alternative housing.
That's true. One good thing to think about when you're talking about having to leave, and if we're talking about a local community, everybody knows somebody that they're close to that doesn't live near them or by them, right? So one thing is it's a buddy system. So if I live in Beaufort County, and let's say my brother, for example, he lives in Raleigh, I'd call him and say, hey, just letting you know that I'm leaving and I'm going here. And people are like, well, why are you telling somebody that's not in the same county? Well, if it's devastation is shown enough, then they'll say, we can't find you. But if you've talked to somebody who does not have the devastation in their area, they can be like, oh, I talked to my brother, and he's told me he's here. And that's a good way to keep contact. It's a buddy system that they're trying to push now. It's a great thing. And on the sheltering, I'll just go ahead and say it, there's no such thing as mandatory evacuation. I can't make anyone leave their home. It's suggested, right? But there can be if it gets bad enough and the flooding comes, and you didn't leave in an ample time, it's hard for us to get resources to you. Sometimes, you're taking, if you're flooded in, I can't get to you right now because what about our resources that we can't get to you? We may need a boat, or we may need this. We don't have it yet. So there's things about evacuations, if it's serious enough and we're saying, hey, we think you need to leave, I'd probably heed the warning, because we're seeing that happen a lot more and more lately. It's in the news right now. There were some evacuations that needed to be warnings, done. Take it back to Helene. Right now it's the word, hey, I think we need to think about leaving our area. I think people are thinking, well, I've lived in Beaufort County my whole life. I've rode through 25 tropical storms or hurricanes, and I know what it's going to be like. Well, it's never the same, so you really don't know. And what we shouldn't focus on is the category of the storm. We need to focus on, how long is it here? What direction is it coming? Because depending on which way it comes, if it goes to the west of the Noose and runs that route up through Raleigh, the prevailing winds, it's just going to scoop the water. If it comes between the Noose and the Pamlico, we know the water's coming in, and the water's going to go toward the middle of the state, and it's got to come back. If we get that nice where it just stays east of the Pamlico, we know we'll get a little, but it's going to suck more of the water out. And these are just things that we know from living here for so long and riding out so many storms. Honestly, man, we get complacent. Even myself, I'll see a storm and like, hey, man, this reminds me of this storm, or you remember the storm that we had, and in 2011, and things but it's hard to compare because you never know what these storms are going to do. What are they going to bring? So, like your point you were saying, being resilient, it means a lot, and knowing where you're going to go. So, what I like to tell people if they're going to leave is try to find somebody you can stay with. Next thing, maybe a hotel that you can go to. I would always tell everybody to let the county be your last resort for sheltering. For one, it's last resort. Your comfort's not going to be where you think it is. It's not going to be the Ritz or the Holiday Inn. It's going to be bare minimum survival mode. And so having those other options, that's another part of being prepared. Hey, like I talked about earlier, my brother lives here, I'm going to go stay with him. If not, I'll make sure I can go stay in this hotel for a couple of days. Or I know somebody else I can stay with. Or in my last case, I don't have this, so now I may have to use the shelter. So these are just things you just need to keep in mind.
Yeah, and on that topic of sheltering, and they certainly are, we say it should be treated as kind of a last resort, but they are available when needed as required.
Yes, they are.
Is it true that if you do go to a shelter, you need to have the tools or resources to sustain yourself in terms of things like medication, things like that? You need to have those with you. You can't necessarily, rely on the staff there to have those accommodations for you.
And that's true. Your personal supplies mean a lot. Your medicines, your personal hygiene items. Again, your electronics, your chargers, things that you need for at least 5 days. If you're on a certain kind of medicine and you know that I've only got 2 days left, if you're in the shelter, it may take us a couple of days to get that. If you're oxygen dependent and you need oxygen, these are things that you need to think about ahead of time. And, one thing we need to do is consider our special need population and our vulnerable populations. Plan for medical necessities for 5 days. If you're making that your option, anywhere you go, whether sheltering in place, sheltering in a public place, sheltering at someone else's place, make sure you have those, your medical necessities and the things you need for 5 days.
Yeah, so it's important to plan ahead in that regard, that you're not just looking, a day after a storm, 2 days after a storm. You're looking far ahead. What do I need? And that's for your entire family, right? Even your pets, down to your pets, you need to figure out.
Pets especially.
I have a dog. Does my dog have food and the necessities? Does my dog have medication? If so, do I need to go to the vet, and make sure I have arrangements in that regard as well?
Yeah, so when it's dealing with pets, one thing that you really need to think about is, what's comfort for your pet, right? I mean, your pet's used to being at its own home. It's used to not being somewhere different. So what's that mean? Does that mean have a thunder blanket, right? Some dogs, need this extra comfort. But one big thing we need to make sure of is making sure your pet's vaccinated. Make sure all the vaccines are up to date, because there are some places you can carry animals, but one of the things is we need to see that vaccine card. So that's another important document that you would need. So when you go to the sheltering, you need to gather your ID, your insurance papers, things that you need to get back to your home. But also, if you got vaccination records for your pets, that's another thing we need to see, because it's hard. It's pretty much let's put it this way. You get a thing, hey, I think you need to evacuate, the order's rising. Well, now in 30 minutes you need to decide what you're going to do, and now you're scrambling. And now you're going to yank your little pup up, and I forgot my cash, I didn't get my phone charger, what do I do? These are little things that, if it's nothing but make a copy of it, just have it in a Ziploc bag. Just not saying make a huge go bag, but little things that you can keep, that if we need to leave the home or leave my residence, that I can take if I need to go somewhere else.
There's a lot to do with messaging here as well, and paying attention to updates as they come in.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And one thing that when I've met with other public information officers from around the state, particularly in the aftermath of Helene, which we'll get to, was the importance of being very direct and intentional with that messaging, especially when conditions are worsening to a point where lives are very much at risk, right? For example, we might need people to leave this area because conditions are getting so severe. As you mentioned kind of before, this would be the best way, if you want access to resources that we have, we need you to get out of this area,
And that's part of, knowing your evacuation zone. But you brought something up, Brandon, and I want your perspective on this. So it's a little story base. We're talking about always staying informed, trust reliable information. I was reading an article last night late, and it was a PIO from Texas, and they were showing pictures and images that people were posting, and it was saying, can you pick out what's wrong? So I was sitting there looking, and it was just devastation. It's kind of like what we saw in Helene, right? But what people had started doing was using AI, making up stories and making pictures. One of the pictures I saw was probably the worst rumble, just devastation, debris, trucks, cars, and looks like it was a Dodge truck that was in the water. You could see the hood in the water, but you had to look real closely. Instead of the bed of the truck, it was the front end of the Dodge again. And Texas pointed out some of the worst problems they're having now is just this how to find the reliable information. How do we know who to trust, and how do we get rid of the rumor mill and the false information that people are sharing just to trying to stir chaos? What's your thoughts on that?
We see that much more frequently now with these disasters, and we certainly saw it during Helene. This is another thing we've talked about on the state level, post-Helene, especially on certain social media sites. People were sharing these kind of just bizarre claims and some AI photos, things like that were very misleading, had incorrect information, but people were sharing it around like it was a real thing, and that complicates things even more so in a situation like Helene, where you had entire communities that were very much in the dark for days, as in we didn't really know what the situation was in certain towns. They had no way of communicating with family members or with officials, so that makes it even more critical to make sure that you're dialed in, that you shouldn't be using social media as your only source of information. There can be good stuff posted on there, especially if you follow, say, the National Weather Service official pages, but also make sure that I tell people, make sure you're following, emergency alert systems, make sure you have radios, make sure you're watching TV or getting information from as many areas as you possibly can, which in certain situations maybe not, may be limited, but just making sure that you're getting those direct messages that we're pushing out, because that contains key information, and also share that information with your neighbors as much as possible. One thing I saw, especially during Helene when I was in Buncombe County, is that you would have some neighborhoods, areas where someone would know about some critical information, say, hey, they're setting up a care shelter, down the street, and maybe their neighbor down the road has no idea about it because they weren't signed up, but had they had those conversations, that information travels fast.
So not to be the doomsday guy, but what's it look like when all communication, we live in a digital age, right? What's it look like when all digital age stuff's done? Our lines are down, our cell phones don't work, our internet's not working, and we have to figure out a different way to communicate with our citizens in the county to get these messages out. What's some ideas that you think you have that we can get messages out? Yeah,
so in those situations, even if you don't have those digital communications as you're talking about, you no longer have text messages, you no longer have phone calls, social media.
My TV don't even work.
TV, radio, all those things that we know of are gone. But what do you have in those situations, in those emergency response situations? Usually you have, say, boots on the ground, right? You have people going out there and helping. You have people going out there addressing it directly, which makes it even more important that you are all on the same page in terms of the emergency response, and that's kind of what you saw during Helene.
Like Black Mountain, what they did, like 2 times a day, they'd have a meeting at a certain area. Yeah. They'd give out information and have a board, right?
Yeah, they would have they would have those meetings. So that's why, as from the emergency management perspective, particularly if you're working in an EOC, emergency operations, we have what's called the Joint Information Center, which is where you make sure that everyone involved in your recovery operation knows what's going on, knows what information needs to be out there.
The open communication.
Yeah, and that way because everyone involved, especially in that severe situation where it's complete blackout, everyone involved can spread that key information. Doesn't matter if you're a volunteer, doesn't matter if you're, say, with FEMA out there talking with people. You can tell them, hey, while you're out there, maybe pass out this flyer, or tell them we're having a meeting at such and such, or tell them that.
Word of mouth.
Yeah, tell them that we're having a shelter opening up here and there.
That whole community approach where neighbors are helping neighbors.
Yeah, it's neighbors helping neighbors, and that makes a huge difference. I think that's a good segue into just going on about Western North Carolina, what we saw, the absolute devastation there.
Terrible.
Last year with Helene, devastation that. And that's another thing that I think is important too.
Biblical proportions is how they said it.
Biblical proportions.
Yeah.
And a storm like that is not something that gets cleaned up overnight, right?
Mm-mm.
Not even in a year, not even maybe in a couple of years.
So I went back in middle of April, and they were still having issues, still cleaning. And I was in Cherokee in April for a conference, and we rode through, and I stopped in Swananoa. And you could still see the devastation. It made a lot of strides, but it was terrible still.
Yeah, and that shows you just kind of the massive amount of damage that happened. And I was there. And for all the listeners out there, so DC and I both, last fall when this, after Helene hit, people from all around the state and really all around the country, it was kind of remarkable.
How can I help? That's all it was. How can I help?
Yeah, how can I help? Those of us in the emergency management field went out there to help with specific tasks, operations. So DC, you were there. One of your roles there in your deployment was to help with emergency shelter operations. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was right. So I was stationed at AB Tech, and it was, when we got the call, it was kind of weird. So the call to go to this shelter was not just a regular shelter. This shelter here there was people with issues. It was the homeless side of the shelter. And what people may not know is Asheville is such a beautiful place. They have a very large population of homeless, as well as a large population of people addicted to drugs. So that's the shelter that I was at. Everybody was nice, man. We did everything we could. It was just amazing. Let me tell you what was amazing. The amazing thing to me was how it got to the point where donations, and early on here in Beaufort County, a lot of people don't know, but as a county in the whole, through the sheriff's office, EM, and just the whole county, that's all I can say is the county, did an awesome job. But I know for a fact that we had 5 or 6 tractor trailers go full. Some were full of water, just essential needs and items that went. So that was one thing we did early on. But what really amazed me was the donations. It got to the point that the state had an Amazon link, and you could buy things from Amazon, and it would direct ship. So when I was at AB Tech, FedEx would show up, and you're talking about total devastation everywhere. FedEx would show up with deliveries, and they were just piling us. Anything down from batteries, diapers, toiletries, you name it, towels, all sorts of things, battery chargers, bank chargers. It was a good partnership with the Red Cross. It's just like anything else. When you open up a shelter, and even if we had to open up a shelter here in Beaufort County, you'd have to have some form of law enforcement. You'd have to have shelter staff, someone running logistics. You'd have to have somebody running day-to-day operations. We have to feed, right? And then another thing, you have to have some type of medical.
Right.
The only thing that was terrible during this time was they just got the water back on. You could not drink the water. You could wash your hands. That was it. So if you washed your hands with water and you were getting ready to eat, they advised you to use sanitary napkins or sanitizer, or wash your hands with distilled water, because just the water was not the best in the world. Seeing these people in these shelters, it's a humbling experience. Yes, it was directed toward the homeless shelter, but there was people that was not homeless before the storm that were there, and just we take for granted what we got, and just seeing people who may have had a lot of stuff and then showing up and just a bag. This is all I got left, and that's a humbling experience, and it gives you a servant's heart, and you want to do whatever you can to help. So what I did when I was there, I was out and about. I didn't stay in the office. I made sure my daily duties were done, but I'd go out and talk to people. Hey man, how are you doing? Let's talk. I was worried about some vaccinations, especially for, like tetanus, because there was a lot of, in floodwaters, which we didn't talk about. You shouldn't be walling around in floodwaters because you can get bacteria, you get a scrape, you probably need a tetanus shot. So I worked with public health to get a vaccine train started for the people in the shelter. And one of their main things was, hey, we don't mind that, but instead of just doing a tetanus shot, let's just make sure everybody's titers are up. They wanted to do, you just can't do one vaccine. They wanted to do the titers, the COVID vaccine, and it was optional to the shelterees in the shelter, and they all appreciated that. And another thing they were talking about, it was during election time, right? Mm-hmm. And they wanted to vote. So we talked with the local transportation authority and the people that were carrying them to, back and from, to get their vaccines. They even took them and let these people vote. Mm-hmm. And that was amazing, just watching how the voting was intense. I mean, the most humbling experience I've ever felt in my whole entire life. Yeah. I mean, all I wanted to do was give everything I could give. Yeah. I'd go eat breakfast with them, I'd eat lunch with them, I'd talk to them. Hey man, what can I do to make you more comfortable? Now, there are some things that are not as nice in a sheltering world like that, but you're going to have that anywhere. But just watching the people and the camaraderie, every morning, I mean, the food, whatever you need, it was to the point that the food would come in, local places would start opening up, or places that weren't as local would say, hey, we'll have your breakfast today, or we'll take care of lunch. And, just watching people, I mean, if you lose everything, that's the only comfort you got. Mm-hmm. I mean, you go from nothing, or let's say you're having everything, you lose everything. Mm-hmm. Man, somewhere a nice hot shower and a nice hot meal and somewhere to lay your head, mm-hmm. that means the world. Right. And man, I can't say it enough. It was the most humbling experience I ever had, and I just wanted to help whichever way I could. And I don't know even how to explain it. I mean, the help in these areas like this, I mean, you've got to have a servant's heart. I mean, you've got some people, with positions of power, and, well, that's beneath me because that ain't what I do. Uh-huh. In this situation, our job is to find our gaps, find our inconsistencies, and if we can make a difference in that area, to make a difference. So it's just devastation, and it's still devastated. I mean, they're making, I had some time, I got to go out and look and just try to help other people, and we made it down. And just, there's places that were blocked off you couldn't get into, and luckily, because we were in a North Carolina DPS truck at that time, we were able to get in areas we couldn't. The same thing you saw, right? Mm-hmm. And it was just, the people were there, and it was, you would think it would be law enforcement. But the people that were doing the roadblocks now, it could have been, parole officers. It could have been anybody. And we went to one, and I remember going to Chimney Rock, and the guy, we rolled the window down. I said, hey man, how y'all doing? It was hot. Y'all want some water? We know we had cold water, so we handed the guys the water. And they were like, hey man, what are y'all doing down here? And the man I was with, he said, man, we just needed a breather. Mm. And he said, well, why'd you come down here? He said, because we figured we got something you want. And he was like, what do you got? And we had maybe 10 cases of water, and we give them all the water we had because they didn't have much left. And just to see the devastation there, I mean, it was terrible.
Yeah, and it's people who've had their entire lives upended in a way that they probably never could foresee coming, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, around here, you think about hurricanes and flooding in our area, we're all mostly aware that can happen, but that's less of a thought out there. In that area, particularly where we were in Buncombe County, I remember I was talking with someone out at the Buncombe County EOC when I was there, and I asked them, what was like your expectation, especially those days before the storm arrived. And she was saying that they kind of understood at that point that it was a serious storm, but they kind of figured, especially being up here in the mountains, that maybe the mountains themselves would kind of break it up a little bit, or just from what they've seen in the past, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. And obviously it turned out to be this devastating thing. So I think it caught a lot of people off guard, and to have, as you're well aware, to just from working with them, to have your life upended in that way, it's difficult, and everyone was affected by it too, right? I mean, I remember working with, and I always give props to the Buncombe County communications team that I worked with. They're doing a great job, and all the people working in that EOC. The challenge there as well is many of those people involved in their response are also dealing with the effects on their own home, right?
Mm-hmm. They talked to a Red Cross lady, said the same thing.
Yeah, they're dealing with home, or their family, their parents are dealing with it. So they're basically working 24/7, because you go in, you're working on the response, and then you go home and you work on your own response.
You know, it's got to be tough.
Yeah.
I remember when the lady I was talking to at the Red Cross, she was like, hey, I just found out I haven't had running water in 27 days. And my husband just called, and they said they got the pipe to the road. And I said, what's that mean, to the road? She said, well, it's to our road. I said, so what's that mean? She said, well, my husband's got some 5-gallon buckets, and he's washed them out, and that's our water.
Yeah.
Can you imagine 27 days without water?
I mean, that's just kind of unbelievable. And we talk a lot about Western North Carolina. This happens, as we see in the present day, this happens everywhere. This can happen everywhere.
And it's not like it's something that happened in the 70s. This happened just last year.
Right, yeah. And it can happen anywhere. That's why that preparedness aspect is so crucial. And I did some drone work out in Buncombe County.
That was some great footage, by the way.
They got some, we got some footage out there of some areas that have been hard hit, and one of my main memories from that time, I went out, and I wish I could remember the name of the park, but it was one of their parks that got hit real hard. It had like this big, I want to say it was like kind of a pond or a lake type thing, and then off to the side it had, you know, baseball, softball fields, play structure. And I had never been to this park, and all I had seen of it was pictures of that body of water, right? And when I got there, there's no water in sight. It had all been washed out. The park itself had been destroyed. And I remember a couple of different people I remember came up and asked me, they're like, where'd all the water go? I'm like, well, it's somewhere, it's not here. But it's part of that is this storm, and it's hard to describe the immensity of this, but it reshaped a lot of land out there. It reshaped entire bodies of water.
So somebody told me that, speaking of how it reshapes the water, at Chimney Rock back in the early 1900s, where the water is now, that's where it was in the early 1900s. They said, we can't build a town here unless we change the way the water runs. So what they did, they changed the path and built the town. Well, when the water come through Chimney Rock, it went through where it would usually be. And that's why you said, man, it's crazy how nature and just history repeats itself, because it happened in the early 1900s when they had a little small thing, and it's just, oh man, I don't know, it's terrible.
And one thing you mentioned before that plays into all of that, and one thing that Eric Heaton with the National Weather Service mentioned on your Hurricane Hex video last year, is when you're looking at preparing for a hurricane, you see it in the forecast, right? The category of a storm gets probably the most attention, right? Cat 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth, and that's certainly a big factor. That tells you a lot about the wind, the intensity, the wind, and that certainly generates a lot of hazards, but that doesn't directly tell you about one major hazard, one thing that can cause major hazards, and that is water.
Yes.
Which we have plenty of around here. So I guess one thing that people really need to be aware of, and part of their preparation, is maybe looking around you, seeing what bodies of water are around you, what those water levels do, particularly when it rains a lot, and kind of look at that, because that's the huge hazard, if you get water moving around, as we've seen.
And last year we worked on an initiative with a state-funded company to have a monitoring system on Richard Beach Road. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Socorro,
yeah, and we do that. So those are the kind of things you look at, because water, we've seen here and we've seen in other places that even tropical storms or Cat 1 or a dying storm, if it moves the water a certain way or interacts with it, it generates a lot of hazards. I mean, one story I go back to, I was in Robeson County during Hurricane Matthew.
That was a Cat 1 when they hit.
Yeah, and that was a Cat 1. And part of the issue with that, if I remember correctly, it was kind of dying down at the time. And I was actually in college there at the time. But the problem was it came over that area as a Cat 1, and then it stopped.
It just hung out.
It just hung out there as a Cat 1, and that caused just unbelievable damage. Torrential rainfall. And that's just a Cat 1, you know. And
it almost feels like we'd be better to get, and I'm not saying this lightly, it almost be better if we get hit by something quick and fast. Boom, boom.
Yeah.
It's the ones that stay around, like Matthew, like you said, down there in Robeson County, that just says, hey, I'm just going to chill for a little while, and here's 40 inches of rain. Have a nice day. That's where we're getting our, that's where we're seeing our damage, our flooding.
Right. Yeah, and even with, I'll just say offshore storms that we can sometimes get around here, because it seems that diagram that we always watch is that storm going to come up to the coast and then kind of veer off? But even if it gets close enough to us as more of a coastal, waterfront community, again, if it's pushing water, pushing wind a certain way, we still face a number of hazards.
That's right. I mean, it don't take that long to get to the ocean from where we're at.
On the topic of Western North Carolina and what we got out of that experience, what lessons did you bring from your experience deploying over there, being a part of that, seeing the aftermath of it from an emergency management standpoint? What lessons did you bring from that and are applying here in Beaufort County as we progress through hurricane season?
So one thing that I noticed was how hard it was to get resources. There's always a system how things work. And so as soon as we got back from Helene, I started working on some ideas for some pre-positioning contracts. We call them pre-disaster contracts. And a lot of people don't understand what these contracts mean or what they're for. But long story short is right now we don't know what the fate of the federal and state funding looks like. As rumor has this all over the news that FEMA's over in 25 after this season, and they're changing the CPGs, they're changing the hazard mitigation plans, they're changing all these plans that are federally run and how they're working to make everything local. And disasters happen local and they end local. So what they're doing, they're trying to push forward, for locals, I'm gonna say local counties because that's what we are, to be prepared. And one way we figured out how to be prepared was pre-position contracts. So this contract here, it is a contract that's pre-positioned. We already have, let's say for an example, we need shower trailer. We'll just make it quick. The way the state's looking is, let's say if we know we need some sanitation equipment, so a shower trailer, I'd have to make a request to the state. Well, it could take up to 5 days for that trailer to be here. And, we're dependent on the state. Well, this pre-position contract puts it where the county has a contract with this contractor. We have a predetermined price, and that price is for the way the RFP was written, but for 5-year contract, that price is good for 5 years. So to keep that in retrospective, to keep how that looks, so where we were at in Buncombe, they needed a shower trailer and a laundry trailer. And you're like, why do we need shower trailer and laundry trailers? Because one of the biggest hazards we have during a storm when we have no power and no water is infectious disease. So you have to stay clean, right? So this one trailer costs us roughly $147,000 for a week. Because one thing we see is price gouging during this time of the year, where when you're calling for, I need it now, you're paying a now price. So for that $147,000, what that costs for a week, we've got the same equipment pre-positioned in a contract for $30,000 for 1 month. So what we're doing, we're saving, taxpayers' money. And when I say taxpayers' money, this is not something we're going to pool unless we have a federal declaration, disaster declaration, a state declaration, and then our chairman will sign the county declaration. What that means is that's how everything gets paid. It's a reimbursable item. So at the end of the day, it's not costing anything for this because the state pays 25% and the feds pay 75%. And all this is wrapped up, and it's a lot of acronyms. So it goes under the Stafford Act under 166-A, and it talks about how emergency management run, how to correlate with the funding with FEMA. And so what we've done, we've identified our gaps. So some of the gaps would have been, comfort shelters if we needed them, hygiene. When I say hygiene, I'm talking right down to toothbrushes and toothpaste for people, hygiene wipes, shower trailers, sanitation. So we have to have the restroom and bathrooms. I mean, how many of the bathroom trailers did we use when we were in Buncombe, right? There's a chance we may need emergency fuel and power. Debris removal, debris monitoring, we do run a state on that, but what's to say that the state's overwhelmed and we need to use our vendor? So our numbers are already locked in. We also have a disaster recovery and reimbursement section. That's where it helps us get our reimbursement money back, because once you start getting resources in and they'll send you the bill, it's up for us to go ahead and do the reimbursement package to get paid. So having this consultant firm here, that's all they worry about is the reimbursement, the PA and the IA funding, for storm victims is called a FEMA 404 and a 406. Help getting that moving. We've also worked with a firm on economic recovery. The one-man thing they tell you during a disaster is people need people. And people need to be out in public. So if this is what we can do to get this coffee shop open on the corner so people can interact with each other, that's the main thing, because people go stir crazy without interaction, because we're humans, right? Potable water. The cool thing about the potable water is the company that we went with, not only can they bring us, they own their own natural spring, for one. For two, they can have bottled water, cases of water. They also have the equipment to go into the river and filtrate water and make it so we can drink it. So, I mean, you're thinking, man, y'all are really prepared for things just going crazy. Well, not really, but what's to say is Beaufort County gets hit hard, and we ask the state for resources and they can't get them. Then what do? We sat back and we're waiting on somebody to take care of us when we could have done it locally. And I think one of the best things we can do as a local emergency management department is to put our citizens first. Know that, hey, these resources are available, and because how it usually works is a town goes to the county will go to the states go to the feds. Well, here's a funny story. So by us having these preposition contracts in place, let's say the state, another county away from us, requests the same shower trailer we just requested, right? And the state don't have a contract with this company. Well, I make the call, or from our leadership, they tell us, CSDC, go ahead and get this shower trailer. When I make the call, let's say that shower trailer's en route to another county, they'll turn that trailer around and bring it to Beaufort County because we've already got a contract with them stating that we're first. So what we're doing is putting our people first. We're showing them, that we care. It's like I went back to the servant's heart. I mean, it's not costing us any money. We're actually saving money. We're saving taxpayers money, and we're not having to worry about, the Fed or the state having to pick us up. So we did a process. We run it correctly. We did all the FEMA guidelines, followed the national CFR guidelines, and man, it was a very successful RFP, and that was a request for proposals. We got well over, man, I'm thinking 60 or 70 vendors come back. And it took days to go through. The commissioners were there for the bid opening, and he said, man, he told me after the meeting the other night, he's like, man, he said, I know y'all had something good, but when I was there looking at all these boxes, he said, I didn't know it was going to be that good. So we scored it, and man, we're just waiting on the contracts to be reviewed, and it looks like in August we're going back before the board. Yeah, so it's a win-win. We've also made a lot of local partnerships as well. We've partnership with our fire districts in the county. We've started a VOAD, and all we're doing is making a partnership with local churches in case something small happens that they can help in little things as well. We've also made partnerships, which we've already had but we've made it more official through our MOUs for like fuel and, sheltering, transportation, equipment, things like this that, it's a no harm, no foul agreement. If I can't help you, I can't help you, but, it's there. We know that we have an agreement. So, we've made a lot of plans with this, with our positioning contracts. We've also gone to the board, not the board, but we've gone to the drafting board, and we've added a lot of plans as well. We've got a disaster reunification plan. What happens? How do we reunificate, the families in a disaster? We've also got a donations management plan, a volunteer management plan. We've created a long-term recovery group. Matter of fact, we had it was a biannually meeting, so we had our first meeting for this year. We try to do it before storm season, after storm season, to identify gaps. So there's a lot of things we're doing in emergency management to be prepared for storms. That way it takes, a lot of the weight off our citizens in the county. Mm-hmm. So there's very good strides. And thing about it is, at the end of the day, when we're talking about these contracts, it's free. Yeah. Because I say it's free, and I use that term lightly, but if we're in a federal declaration and a state declaration, why wait 8 days to have it here when we can have the same product here in 48 hours and pay a third of the cost? Mm-hmm. So,
and a key part about those preposition contracts too is, and this speaks to just how we just want to be prepared for anything, any worst case scenario. A lot of those contracts aren't necessarily our plan A or our plan B. Mm-mm. A lot of this is just we get to a certain point and we say, okay, we need to pursue this.
That's correct.
But they're there if we need it.
That's
We're
right.
Not just day of, okay, where do I get a trailer?
And it's not costing us a dime to have these already pre-positioned, but we know if we need them, they're there.
And knock on wood that we don't have to activate any of this. But if we need it, if we need those resources, we're not scrambling at the last second to find them.
Where do we get this? Where do we get that?
Especially when you have counties, as you mentioned, all around you, also saying, "Hey, where do I get a trailer? Where do I get these resources? Where do I get water?" You have those dialed in right away.
And it was a lot of work to get it done, but I think that's one of the things in emergency management we do, because we run off, it's like a little creed, we're off prevention, preparedness, mitigation, right? Mm-hmm. Recovery and response, right? So one of our things is, this is part of our mitigation, it's part of our prevention, and preparedness, right? Response and recovery, it's even part of recovery. The first thing we do is something bad happens, we hit response, but as soon as something bad happens, we always should start our recovery process. So just running the 5 staples of emergency management, this is our core principles, and this is what we should be doing for our county and for our citizens in Beaufort County.
Well, DC, we're getting close to the 1 hour mark, and I know you're a busy man as you have many contracts and many initiatives on your plate. So I won't take up too much more of your time, but I appreciate you stopping by for the first episode of our podcast, and an important one because this time of year, again, preparation is the key. Is there any major points that we haven't touched on yet, or any parting words you have for our residents here in Beaufort County as we continue through these months and as we continue through hurricane season?
One of the big things, I just want to hammer it back down and just circle back around, just make sure you have trusted information. Don't just take information from any source. Make sure it's trusted information. Brandon, you talked about it. Your National Weather Service, our government channels. Be very careful with social media. You don't know what kind of information you're getting. There's a lot of things on our website in emergency management that if you need resources and you want more information, you can come to that. I think it's Beaufort County. .gov, right? Beaufort County
BeaufortCountyNC.gov.
Yeah, don't do BeaufortCounty.gov. You'll go to Beaufort County in South Carolina.
And that's also a key point. We're not Beaufort County,
it's
South
Beaufort
Carolina.
County, but there's a lot of resources on our website. I say ours, but Brandon does a great job keeping that together, and there's different links. And if you go to emergency management, there's a lot of things, information for preparedness that you can find.
Mm-hmm. And we also have, through Optimum, we have cable channel 5, our government access channel, where we publish information there as well, not just commissioners meetings. That's also where we play, for example, our Hurricane Hack series, where we have DC and a number of guests go over.
You didn't say my favorite thing during our whole Hurricane Hacks thing. Remember our favorite term we did? I got it wrote down. Turn around, don't drown.
Turn around, don't drown. You can learn turn around, don't drown, and a number of other topics on Hurricane Hacks on Channel 5 and on our YouTube page. Well, DC, always great to have you.
Brandon, I enjoyed it.
Keep up the good work. It's one of those things where you do a lot of really hard work, a lot of preparation that you hope you never have to use. I think we say we're working out muscles that we hope we never have to flex. But if the time comes, then it's always good to have those in place. So thanks for stopping by today, and I'm sure we'll catch you later.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me.